Okay, so welcome again. Thank you all for being here, for registering, and for joining us live or for watching the recording later. So this is Culikid's All Foods Fit Youth Nutrition webinar. And so I'm Kelly Bly, I'm Culikid's Executive Director, and we're joined by Sophia, who is our dietetics intern, who will be leading you through most of the information. So I'll start off by introducing Culikid for anybody who might not be familiar with the organization already. Oh, that's okay, Sophia. We can go to, if you want to just go to the second slide while I talk, and then I'll go backwards. Sorry. But yeah, so Culikid, we're a New York City-based nonprofit. So if you haven't worked with us before, we'll also tell you a little bit about our services at the end to see if you or your child or teen wants to join one of our classes. We provide healthy culinary programs for people of all abilities, and we try to focus not just on teaching cooking, but also on building social independence and motor skills. So we do that through a variety of programs that, again, we can talk about at the end. We have a lot of virtual things going on and a handful of in-person. So I will also introduce the objectives of the webinar, so that way we all know what we're in for. So we will start by understanding the basics of nutrition, learn the importance of each of the nutrients and how they affect the human body, visualize what a typical plate should look like for the individuals in your home, and identify how to incorporate all foods in moderation into your household. So we'll utilize, and hopefully you'll be able to utilize the webinar information when making food choices in the future. So we're going to start out with very basic, like intro to nutrition and all of that, and then get more into the methodology and answer some questions also about picky eaters and how that can come into play. So again, if you didn't hear already, if you're just starting to join us, if you have specific questions, you can enter them in the chat throughout, and we might stop and be able to answer them on the spot, or we'll save them for the end when we have a question and answer session. So feel free to engage with us. Everybody is muted, but you can utilize the chat, and when you get to questions and answers, you can unmute yourself then. So I'll introduce myself a little bit more and then turn it over to Sophia. So I'm Culikid's Executive Director. My background is also in social work. So I've been with Culikid since 2017, and I started out as doing social skills for teens with developmental disabilities. So that's where I started out, and that's my background. Now leading the organization for several years and combining two important things, which is working with social skills and cooking skills. So this year we're really lucky to be joined by a dietetic intern for the first time. And I'll turn it over to Sophia, who has put our presentation together, who will lead us through the majority of our content. Let her introduce herself and then get us started.
Thank you, Kelly. Hi, everyone. I'm Sophia Rizzuto, and like Kelly said, I'm the dietetic intern here at Culikid. I am currently doing my community rotation with Culikid, which is part of my supervised practice. I can explain a little bit about that in the future, but a little bit about me. I am currently in my second year of graduate school at Pace University. I'm enrolled in their nutrition and dietetics program. It's a master's and coordinated program, meaning that I get my degree and my internship at the same time. I will be graduating at the end of this upcoming summer. I also received my bachelor's degree from Syracuse University in 2020, which was also nutrition. So I have been studying this for a while. I really enjoy it. First, I wanted to explain to you guys a little bit about the dietetics profession. So a registered dietitian, or someone whose name you may see with RD or RDN at the end, they're the only licensed nutrition professional in the health field. So someone who goes by a nutritionist does not necessarily have the same experience, the same knowledge, or the same expertise as a registered dietitian would. And we, as registered dietitians, have various criteria that we have to meet before we receive that credential. So we need a bachelor's degree in nutrition, or just a normal bachelor's degree, and then completion of required nutrition coursework. A master's degree, which is starting as of 2024. It does not need to be in nutrition, but you do need a master's degree. 12 100 hours of supervised practice, which is what I was referring to before. We have 4 rotations: food service, community, which I'm in now, like I said, clinical, and an elective rotation. And then at the end of all of that, we have to take a boards exam, which once passed gives us that credential. And then in order to keep that credential, we have to receive a certain amount of continuing education credits every year, which is just kind of our way of making sure that we're staying up to date with all of the most recent nutrition research and everything that's going on in the field. So as RDs, we are able to treat conditions, but we cannot diagnose them and we cannot prescribe medication. So for example, you may see a registered dietitian for anything that's diet related, for a chronic disease like irritable bowel disease, hypertension, or cardiovascular disease, any sort of gastrointestinal issues. If you're looking for weight maintenance, weight loss, or weight gain, or any nutrient deficiencies that you may have, we are able to help with that. There are many opportunities for RDs in the workforce. We can work in hospitals, we can work in private practice, we can work in acute care settings like nursing homes. There's many dietitians in the sports field helping professional athletes. We can work in food service. There's really a lot of options nowadays. But one last thing before we dive into the material, I just want to preface all of this, that this information is coming from someone who has studied this topic for 6 years. So I do have an abundance of knowledge, but I am not a professional just yet. So nutrition is something that is very individualized. So these are kind of general information and recommendations that I'm giving, but not something that's personal to you. So if you do have any nutrition concerns, it's always great to speak with your doctor or a registered dietitian about those. But with that being said, let's get right into it. So the first thing I wanted to do is share with you guys the principles of the science of nutrition. So this is something that we learned in the beginning of our education, but there's 3 here that I really wanted to highlight in particular as they coincide with the topics that we're going to cover in the presentation this evening. So the first one is number 4. Poor nutrition can result from both inadequate and excessive levels of nutrient intake. I wanted to highlight this because a lot of times people associate poor nutrition with only inadequate levels, not excessive. So I thought that that was important to note. And then 9 and 10 are really going to get into our idea of all foods fit and everything in moderation. Being adequacy, variety, and balance are key characteristics of healthy dietary patterns, and there are no good or bad foods. So we're going to talk about that later on, but I just wanted to get that into everyone's mind before we get into the nitty gritty. So the first thing we're going to do is go through the basics of nutrition and break down the nutrients. We're going to start with macronutrients. These are needed in large quantities. There are 3 types of macronutrients. There's protein, carbohydrates, and lipids. Proteins are chemical substances made up of chains of amino acids. Carbohydrates are chemical substances made up of a singular sugar molecule or sugar molecules in various forms. And lipids are components of foods that are soluble, so they can dissolve in fat, but they cannot dissolve in water. And we're going to go into each in depth. So before I do that, I want to talk about calories first. You're all very probably familiar with the word calorie since it's found right at the top of every nutrition label. So calories are a measurement of energy. In the nutrition world, we have the kcalorie. So what you see on the slide, kcal, and 1 kcal is equal to 1 food calorie. So that's equivalent to that number that we see on those nutrition labels. And we find calories in all of our macronutrients. So in our proteins, in our lipids, in our carbohydrates, and also in alcohol. So first, we're going to talk about protein. Proteins are the building blocks for the body. They make up our hair, our skin, our nails, our bones, and muscle. They also give our tissues and our organs their shape so that they can function properly. So since proteins are building blocks of the body, amino acids are the building blocks of the proteins. And these are broken into 2 different categories. There's essential amino acids and non-essential amino acids. The essential ones, our bodies cannot make them ourselves, so therefore we do have to get them from the diet. And then the non-essential ones can be made in our body, so it's not necessary to get them from food. Complete proteins provide all 9 of the essential amino acids, and that can come from any animal-based protein. Whole sources of soy or quinoa and buckwheat are also complete proteins, and those are obviously non-animal proteins. And you can combine 2 incomplete proteins to make a complete protein. One of my favorite examples to use, since it's so commonly eaten together, is brown rice and black beans. So based on the amino acid profiles of these two foods, you can, once eat them together, they provide complete proteins. And the recommended intake for protein is 10 to 35% of energy intake. So like I just said, calories are energy. So this means that 10 to 35% of our calories should come from protein. So now for lipids. They aid in hormone production, help with cell growth. They can be turned into energy for our body to use, and they can also be transformed into body fat. And the role of body fat is to protect our organs and keep the body warm. So it is essential for us and to keep living. They also help the body absorb all fat-soluble vitamins. We'll talk more about this later when we go into vitamins, but just to keep that in the back of your mind. With fats, there are unsaturated, saturated, and trans fats. So saturated fats are solid at room temperature. So these come from animal sources of fat and tropical oils. So think of something like the marbling on a piece of steak, or butter or coconut oil. All of these things, if they're sitting on the counter at room temperature, are solid. Unsaturated fats are liquid at room temperature. So this is like our traditional oils, like olive oil, vegetable oil, those kinds of things. And then trans fats are fats that are supposed to be liquid, but are turned into solids. So this is something like margarine or shortening. And because of this, these are highly processed, since they're taking them out of what their natural form is and making it into something else. And then one other area of lipids that I wanted to talk about are essential fatty acids. Again, these are essential because they're not produced in the body, so they're needed from the diet. And essential fatty acids help to make hormones that regulate blood clotting. They help with contraction and relaxation of our artery walls. They help with inflammation and to regulate genetic function. And 20 to 35% of our energy intake should be coming from fats. And with this, we like to aim that a higher amount of our fats are coming from unsaturated fats and essential fatty acids, and a lower end of that intake is coming from saturated fats or trans fats. So now going into carbohydrates. Carbs are our body's #1 preferred source of energy. Our brain loves to use carbohydrates for energy. They provide and they store energy by breaking down glucose or sugars in the body. They help build molecules, and then they spare protein and fat to be used for other functions when we're using it for energy. With carbs, there's two types. They're simple and complex. So simple carbs raise our blood sugar very quickly. These are fruits and vegetables or high sugar products, and they are digested very quickly. So that's why we get the rush and crash type of energy burst from them. And then complex carbs, or which can be also called starches, they take longer to digest. So they're a more stable source of energy, as it gives us more energy over a long period of time. And this can be found in foods like whole grains or starchy vegetables like potatoes and parsnips. So fiber and sugar are also forms of carbohydrates, and I will talk more about those in just a second. Also, carbs are widely distributed in plant foods. Milk is the only animal food source that contains carbohydrates. So all animal foods don't have carbs unless it's milk. And then for intake, 45 to 65% of energy intake should be coming from carbohydrates. So with the past three molecules that we went over, energy intake, most should be coming from carbs, then protein, then fat. And then this is just pictures of all foods that contain carbs. So this pretty much shows that all whole foods, aside from meat, like I just mentioned, have carbs. So they truly are essential to our diet. So now for fiber. So like I just said, fiber is a carbohydrate. It's unable to be broken down by the body, so we can't digest these in our system. So there's two kinds of fiber. There's soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. And both of these are beneficial to our health. So the soluble fiber helps to regulate our blood sugar and to lower blood cholesterol. Insoluble fiber helps food move through your digestive system. It promotes GI regularity, prevents constipation, and also adds bulk to stool. For sugar, we have natural sugars, which is found in whole foods like fruits, vegetables, and milk. And then added sugars are commonly found in processed foods or in preparation of foods, like something as simple as adding sugar to your coffee. That's an added sugar. Added sugars in themselves include natural sugars like table sugar, brown sugar, honey, maple syrup, those kinds of things. But then there's also artificial sweeteners. And then one thing that I like to make people aware of regarding artificial sweeteners. So when something says like 0 added sugars on a label, that means that none of those natural occurring sugars are added in the product. So there's no table sugar added, there's no honey added, there's no brown sugar added. But a lot of the time there are artificial sweeteners which don't count as sugar in terms of a nutrition label. So these companies are able to still make the product taste good, but they can have that 0 grams of added sugar label on there. So that's something I just like to point out to people to give extra knowledge. And then this larger bubble here lists various versions of added sugars, whether natural or artificial, that you may find in an ingredients list. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but feel free to take a screenshot if you'd like. I can leave it up for a second before we keep going.
Yeah, and we'll
like
also
I
share a PDF and the recording so everybody can come back to this. And then since I've already interrupted, I want to just remind everybody that there is also the supplemental materials that we provided, which has a chart which summarizes all of this information for each of the micro and macronutrients. And it's going to be a really great resource, not just for you, but also to share with your child and teen to get them to understand. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but I just wanted to preface that, that this is also easily digestible in just a 1-sheeter. So.
Okay, so first we did macronutrients. Now we're going to go into the micronutrients. As you can probably tell by its name, micronutrients are needed in a much smaller amount than macronutrients. Vitamins and minerals both fall into this category, and they're both just various chemical substances that each perform particular functions in our body. So first, we're going to talk about the fat-soluble vitamins. So I had mentioned this term before, and when talking about fats, so what this means is that these vitamins need fat to have better absorption rates in their body. And for us, this is simply like just eating something rich in vitamins paired with the fat. So if you sauteed spinach in olive oil or butter, that is enough fat to then help it reach its maximum absorption rate. So our fat-soluble vitamins are vitamins A, D, E, and K. Vitamin A helps the immune system work properly, helps with vision, and keeps your skin and certain body linings that we have healthy. Vitamin D regulates calcium and phosphorus, which both are essential for healthy bones, teeth, and muscles. Vitamin E helps to maintain healthy skin and eyes, and it strengthens our body's immune system. And then vitamin K is essential for blood clotting. So this really, really helps with wound healing. And then the water-soluble vitamins only need water to be properly absorbed, which there is already an abundance of in our body. So therefore, there's no other extra work that needs to be done for maximum absorption. The water-soluble vitamins contain all of the B vitamins and vitamin C. So the B vitamins help the body release energy from food, keep our skin, eyes, and nervous system healthy, stimulate keratin protection, which is great for our hair and our nails, help to make fatty acids and form red blood cells. And there are a hefty amount of B vitamins, but the ones that we're going to be focusing on are, I guess, more common to have a deficiency in or are needed in larger amounts rather than the ones we're not mentioning. So this is thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, pyridoxine, biotin, folate and folic acid, and vitamin B12. And then we have vitamin C, which protects and keeps us healthy and our cells healthy, maintains healthy skin, bones, and cartilage, helps with wound healing as well, and aids our body's immune system. So now I'm just going to touch on some foods that are good sources of each of these vitamins that we just covered. So vitamin A can be found in eggs, cheese, oily fish like salmon or mackerel, milk and yogurt, yellow fruits, so mango, papaya, and yellow and orange vegetables like carrots, sweet potatoes, and bell peppers. For vitamin D, good sources are oily fish as well, red meat, liver, and milk. Milk is a really big one for vitamin D. Vitamin E, our good sources are plant oil, so something like vegetable oil or sunflower oil, nuts and seeds, wheat germ, and green leafy vegetables like spinach or kale. For vitamin K, good sources can include Green leafy vegetables, again, cruciferous vegetables, so something like a Brussels sprout or broccoli or cabbage, and kiwi. For our B vitamins, thiamine is found in whole grain breads, fortified breakfast cereals, meaning it is added back into those products. Peas, bananas, and oranges. Folate and folic acid is found in legumes like chickpeas or kidney beans, and green leafy vegetables. And then B12 is found in meat, fish, milk, cheese, and eggs. And then for vitamin C, this is found in our citrus fruits and their juices. So like lemons, oranges, limes, and grapefruits and their juices, berries like strawberries or raspberries, and cruciferous vegetables. So for minerals, there are 15 essential minerals. And then again, this means we need them all from the diet. I'm not going to go through all of these either because half of them, 99% of people get enough of since there's so little of them needed, but I'm going to highlight the more prominent ones again and the few that are more common to have deficiency for. So this is calcium, which helps to build our bones and keep our teeth strong, regulates muscle contractions, and makes sure that our blood clots normally. Sodium is needed in the body in small amounts to keep the levels of fluid in the body balanced. Potassium helps to control the balance of fluids in the body as well and helps our heart work properly. Iron has a very important role in making red blood cells for our body. Magnesium turns food into energy and ensures our parathyroid gland works normally. And that's just a gland that helps regulate our hormones. And then phosphorus helps to build strong bones and teeth. So again, just going to go in into some of the food sources for these minerals. Calcium is found in dairy, green leafy vegetables, and fortified soy beverages or fortified flours. So if you're someone who does not have dairy or your child does not have dairy, fortified soy beverages are a great replacement, especially for calcium. So for sodium, this one's a little bit different. Like I had mentioned, there's a number that we want to limit our sodium to. So we want to aim for under 2,400 milligrams. Sodium is found in most foods in small amounts, but many processed foods contain added salts or higher amounts of sodium. So some ways to kind of just keep check on this is to opt for low sodium versions of products that tend to be higher, like soy sauce or chicken broth. You can see on the shelves, there's low sodium soy sauce right next to it or low sodium chicken broth right next to it. And then always, if you're cooking, to taste food before adding table salt to it. And then for potassium, some good sources are bananas, potatoes, and vegetables like broccoli or parsnips, nuts, and seeds. For iron, some good sources are red meat, green leafy vegetables, so spinach, kale, even dandelion greens, cruciferous vegetables, and legumes. Some good sources of magnesium are nuts and seeds, green leafy vegetables, dark chocolate, and fruits like bananas or avocados. And then lastly, for phosphorus, some good sources are red meat, dairy, fish and poultry, and whole grains. So that means like whole grain bread, brown rice, oats, that kind of thing. All right, now we're going to switch gears a little bit and we're going to go into the nutrition needs based on each age group. So this first slide is just, these are the needs for adults 18 and up. I'm putting this here just to compare, and I know some of you may have teenagers who are nearing this age group, so this may be helpful to you as well. Each slide is going to have 2 age groups on them. I'm not going to read through every single portion of every food group, but again, feel free to take a screenshot, or it will also be in the supplemental materials. And one thing I want you guys to keep in mind when reading these is that every day's intake of food will not look the same. That's completely normal. No one's going to eat the same amount of everything every single day. So there's no need to overstress to make sure that your child meets the mark for every single one of these food groups every day. It's just kind of a standard to try and make sure that the majority of meals or the majority of days have this intake pattern. So for adults, these needs are based on a 2,000 calorie diet, which is a standard suggestion for American adults. Again, everyone's body is different, so this can vary from person to person, but this is just the general statement. So first, this is the needs for toddlers aged 1 to 3, and then the needs for children aged 4 to 8. And for all of the ranges you'll see on these slides and the next one as well, it's typical for girls to need more towards the lower end to the middle of the range, and for boys to need more towards the middle to upper end of the range. So for example, if you have a toddler that's 2 years old, it says 2 to 5 ounces of protein. So if you have a girl toddler, she'll probably need more like 2 to 3.5 ounces of protein. And if it's a boy, look for 3.5 to 5 ounces of protein. So then just apply that to all of these ranges for these slides. And then also, as you can see, as age progresses, you'll see each category slowly grows to meet that needs, those needs for adults 18 and up. So next we have pre-adolescents aged 19 to 13, and then adolescents aged 14 to 17. And like I just mentioned, you'll see the same trends going on where there's slow growth to reach that 2,000 calorie diet for adults and the subsequent food groups. So this is My Plate. My Plate is a great resource for nutrition and meals and all things like that. And the idea is that this is what we would like an ideal plate to look like. And there's a philosophy to each section of the plate. So I'll go through each of those. So for fruits, which you'll see in the top left corner, focus on whole fruits. So any fruits, or fruits can be any whole fruit or 100% fruit juice. That is what we count as fruit for this. They can be fresh, frozen, canned, dried, or dehydrated, and maybe whole, cut up, peeled, or cooked. But you do want at least half of those fruits to come from whole fruit. So instead of something like fruit juice or applesauce, you would rather half of your fruits come from a whole fruit itself. Moving on to vegetables, which is in the lower left corner, you want to vary your veggies. Varying your vegetables can increase the amount of nutrients you will get and your child will get. So vegetables, again, count as any whole vegetable or 100% vegetable juice. These can also be raw or cooked, can be fresh, frozen, canned, dried, or dehydrated, maybe whole, cut up, or mashed. There are 5 subgroups of vegetables. We have dark green vegetables, red and orange vegetables, beans, peas, and lentils or legumes, starchy vegetables, and an other category. And then moving to grains, which is in the top right. With grains, we want to make half of our grains whole grains. And most things will be labeled when they're whole grains, so that's very easy to find at the store. So grains can count as any food that's made from wheat, rice, oats, cornmeal, barley, or another grain cereal. Whole grains mean that it has the entire grain kernel. So that's something like whole wheat flour, whole wheat bread, oatmeal, or brown rice. And then refined grains have been milled more. So 2 parts of the grain have been removed. And this gives the grain a finer texture and improves shelf life as well, which is why it's very commonly used. But then with doing that, it also removes the naturally occurring fiber in them, the naturally occurring iron and B vitamins. So this is something that you would find with like white flour, corn grits, white bread, or white rice. But then many refined grains are also enriched, meaning that some of those nutrients that are stripped during that milling process are added back in. So that means the fiber can be added back in, the iron can be added back in, and the B vitamins. Then moving to protein, which is right below the grains. Again, you also want to vary your protein routine. This helps intake the maximum amount of nutrients that you can get. So a wide variety of protein foods, again, equals more nutrients for your body. So try to have meat or poultry choices that are on the leaner side on a more regular basis. So like when possible, so anything like 90-10 ground beef or skinless chicken thighs versus skin on chicken thighs. Choose seafood options that are higher in beneficial fatty acids. So those essential fatty acids that I was talking about before. So that can be something such as salmon or trout. And then for dairy in the top right corner, having a low fat or fat-free dairy product some of the time is beneficial. And then if you are someone who does not have dairy or your child does not have dairy, you can use lactose-free dairy or any fortified version. Fortified soy versions are the most nutritionally compatible to dairy milk, but nowadays there's so many different types of dairy-free milks that we can have, and a lot of them are enriched and fortified as well. So those should have the same nutrients that you would get from milk normally. Dairy products include milk, yogurt, cheese, any lactose-free milk, because that is still a dairy product. Fortified soy milk products are considered dairy in the eyes of the USDA, and other dairy-free alternatives. So this is not including foods made from milk that have low amounts of calcium and a higher fat content, something like cream cheese or sour cream or butter. That would just be counted as a fat item. So again, in our supplemental materials, there will be a link to the USDA's website. That is a great resource. They have things split up by age group as well that you can look at. And again, this is something that we aim for on a normal basis, but this is not something that has to happen every single day. Every single plate at every single meal does not have to look like this. It will not be the end of the world if it does not. So then playing off of that, now we're going to go into the idea of all foods fit, which is something that I, as a future nutrition and professional preach to people all the time. So the ideology of this and all foods fit is that it encompasses the idea of avoiding restriction of certain food groups or certain foods. If it's medically necessary for your child, obviously continue to do so. But in this sense, we're talking about situations where that is not the case. So one of the things that we do with this is pull away from labeling foods such as good and bad or healthy and unhealthy, because healthy can mean different things to different people. So what I like to do is to use the term nutrient dense to describe foods people would consider healthy. So like fruits and vegetables and whole grains are nutrient dense. So you want to make sure that you get enough nutrient dense foods every single day, but you don't need to restrict from non-nutrient dense foods. Everyone is different. There's no one size fits all method when it comes to nutrition. And I like to tie this into the fact with a lot of things that you may see being advertised as, if you want this result, do this and this will work. And for some people it might, but for others it won't. And that's why we like to give everyone an individualized approach, because everyone's body is so different. It's really all about balance, because too much of anything is not good for the body, even if it's apples, chicken, or rice. I mean, too much soda is not good for the body, but neither is too much spinach. So everything in moderation is really my best approach to nutrition. So talking about that, we're incorporating it into the home. There's a few methods and ideas that I wanted to go over that are commonly like taboo items, I guess you could say. Dessert being the first one. So I would say avoid rewarding children with a favorite food or dessert, because using certain foods as rewards can glorify that food and it makes it more desirable to a child rather than something that they can have when they're in the mood for it. You can serve dessert with fruit to make it a bit of a more mindful choice. So you can have ice cream topped with berries and whipped cream, or a piece of cake with a banana, something like that. Or even serving dessert with dinner, having it on the table while you have dinner makes it less of a reward or an attainable thing that someone will get when they finish their meal. With snacking, if your child is hungry, that means their body needs fuel. So allow them to have a snack, even if it's close to mealtime. It can be something as simple as pairing a fruit or a vegetable with a carb and a fat. That will provide a satiating snack if it's more during like in between meals and not necessarily before a meal. So you could do like carrots, pretzels, and hummus. That's a really great snack, and it provides something from each of the macronutrients to keep your child full longer. But with snacking, let your children listen to their body's hunger cues and teach them to do that. So by letting them have a snack if they're hungry, even if it's an hour before dinner, that allows them to listen to their body. So if it's before dinner, maybe don't give them a whole carrots, pretzels, and hummus. They can have something smaller, but try to avoid restricting that intake because it's about to be a mealtime shortly. And then with plates, avoid offering ultimatums for your child to finish their meal. If they're full, there's no reason to force them to eat more food. Again, this is listening to their hunger cues. If you're hungry, your body needs fuel. If you're full, you don't need anything else. Your body is set. And then serve moderate portions. It's always better that a child receives a moderate portion. If they're still hungry, that means their body needs more. They can have more. But then serving a larger portion and then saying you have to finish your meal would then tear them away from those hunger cues, because if they're full, they would still have to finish that plate. So it's kind of just circling back to the idea of letting your child listen to their body and allowing them to do so around mealtime and around snack time. Allowing them to eat without restriction opens the doors to listening to their body and listening to their cravings. Because if they are allowed and able to listen to those cravings, sometimes they'll want the ice cream, but sometimes they'll want fruit, and then sometimes they won't even want dessert at all. So having this being a regular part of your routine allows it to become that and not something that they desire every single day. And then pulling off of that, we're going to talk about picky eaters for a second and getting enough nutrients for these picky eaters. I know picky eaters are very common among children. And if this is something that you're dealing with at home, you may be nervous about your child getting all the nutrients that they should. Please don't stress, don't panic. As some of you are well aware, I'm sure, food is not the only option. Supplementation is a great alternative when you cannot get those nutrients through food. But again, I would suggest always speaking with your doctor or your a registered dietitian when considering this for your child, so that they can help figure out what is right for your child specifically, since it is, again, such an individualized thing. So they can help you figure out what vitamin supplements or what mineral supplements or what protein powder might be best for your child and for their diet.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these tactics here that we've summarized on this slide to help with expanding the diet of picky eaters. But I also want to mention that Culikid has done an entire hour-long webinar on this topic. So we can share that with all of you as well if you want to dive deeper into that topic specifically. But there's a couple of principles that I always suggest trying, which are up here. So try serving a new food if you're trying to introduce new food along with a familiar food. So often they can also be called safe foods. So if your child has a safe food, don't completely take that away, even if it's not the most healthy food. A lot of kids might like chicken nuggets or mac and cheese, and you might be trying to get them away from that. But it's less intimidating to offer that alongside the new food and let them try. The other thing is that not to feel discouraged by them not trying it the first time or even the second time. So it can take 8 to 20 exposures before your child will try a new food or accept a new food. So they might not try it. They might try it and say they don't like it. But that doesn't mean you should stop offering it. So it's best to offer it in a low pressure way. And so I'll talk about a couple of those as well that you can do specifically. But it's good to offer foods from each of the 5 food groups each day. So this might be different for different children and teens, depending on their preferences and how willing they are to accept new things close to them, how close to them. So maybe for your child, you're able to offer a little bit of all of the food groups on their plate. And that's okay. They know that they don't have to have all of it. It's very low pressure and that works. That may be too much for somebody who that's too much change right away or too many new things right away. So you can also start by having it on your plate or on the table or on a separate plate that's in front of them. This is not a one size fits all situation either. So it depends on what their preferences are around things like that. One of the other things is to have your child involved in the cooking process or preparing the meals in some capacity. So that's something that Culikid utilizes in our programs. And we actually see that from cooking an item that children and teens are actually much more willing to try it. And this comes from a couple of principles is they're, are seeing it and they're dealing with it in this low pressure kind of way where you don't have to eat it. You just have to, chop it up for the meal. So, they're getting exposed to it in a certain way. But also when it comes to the prepared dish, that often they feel a sense of pride and accomplishment and they want to be involved in that final product and see what it's like. This doesn't work for everybody again, and it might not work for some of their least desired foods, but it's certainly a fun way for them to build skills while also being introduced to new foods and at least increasing their likelihood of trying it. So every exposure is important, even if they don't eat it. And an exposure can include just them touching it or smelling it, seeing it. It doesn't have to be eating it for it to be considered a successful exposure. And so we have a couple of low pressure exposure ideas here, which includes playing with food, including real food and fake food. So this is also a little bit taboo, or at least was when I was growing up. You're told don't play with your food, but I'm a very big proponent of play with your food. So, touch it, smell it, see what it's like. And then, you could do even more structured kind of like playtime with food, such as making art. So like, let's make a portrait, out of our fruit and put them into a fun design or a flower, or anything. So you could just like be making things with the food, which again, low pressure, you don't have to eat it. We're just making stuff. So they're still touching the food, they're smelling it and all of that. Reading books and watching videos about food, especially geared towards children. We have a lot more specific examples in our other webinar. Even just involving them in grocery shopping is great. They definitely aren't expected to eat the food then. So you can, have them pick something out of the grocery store. You can turn it into a little bit of a scavenger hunt game, just involved with you and talking to them about different things they see, things like that. And then another one, this kind of goes along with the playing of food, is that it's also important to let them spit it out. So they know that if they put it in their mouth and they really hate it, they hate the texture, the taste, something that they are not committed to it, that they can spit it out at any time, especially for the new food. So that might seem a little taboo as well. And, maybe not encouraged in certain settings, but especially when you're at home, I think that's a safe principle to have. So they know that they, again, low pressure. So next, I just want to talk a little bit about hiding foods, because this is something that's discussed often with picky eaters. This is not something that I am a large proponent of because it doesn't actually teach your child to like new foods. So if you're doing, we have some examples of what we're going to call masking, but we'll talk about, how that's different. And so if you're hiding something like in a smoothie, you're mixing up some vegetable in there, they're not actually learning to like that vegetable. And if they find out that you say, oh, this is just an ice cream milkshake, but actually there's blended up cauliflower in it or spinach, then that creates some distrust and they might not, it will be very hard to kind of gain that back and get them to try a new food in the future. So we talk about masking, but we want to be upfront about it. So we can hide the taste, but be upfront about what they're eating. Tell them all the ingredients in there. They can see you watch it. And I think that the handouts that we have in our materials folder, which I'll put a link in the chat once I'm done talking, is a really good resource for this. So my recommendation for using it is to convince not convince, but to get your child or teen on board and say, you're really lacking a certain vitamin from your diet. So let's look at this spreadsheet, this little chart, and say, this vitamin we want because it will do this for your body. It will make you big and strong. It will help your immune system so you'll stay healthy. And how are we going to get it? And then there's some list of options about the foods that will give you that vitamin or nutrient, that you can have a conversation with your child and they can feel like they're making a choice. And so these are some ways to help them not have to necessarily taste it and not have to deal with the certain textures of it potentially, but that will still get the nutrients into their diet. So that's my spiel on hiding foods. And I'll let Sophia go into a little bit more details of some examples we have here.
So some of the examples that I came up for masking things like fruits or vegetables, again, your child would be aware that these things are in there, so we're not keeping that from them. But these are some great options. I even tend to do these myself if I feel that, oh, I didn't get enough of this today, let me throw it in there. Some great things, you can take cauliflower rice, blend that into a smoothie. This actually also helps to thicken the smoothie since it's typically frozen. So it'll make your smoothie more milkshake-like, I guess you could say. So if you like thicker smoothies, that helps as well. Spinach can also be blended into a smoothie, or you could use it to blend into homemade pesto. So you could do a combination of spinach and basil. So it just bumps up the nutrients of that sauce. With zucchini noodles or spaghetti squash, what I like to do is just take a handful and mix it in with my spaghetti. So it's like a mixture of pasta and vegetables in pasta sauce. So you still get to twirl it all on the same fork. And even if your child has some sort of sensory, they don't like certain textures, you can just make sure you cook those vegetables to be a similar texture as the pasta. So that way it doesn't affect them in that sense. Butternut squash is commonly blended into make a mac and cheese sauce. So you can even go with that as like a fall mac and cheese. And then black beans and avocados can be substituted for eggs and brownies. So this is also something that can be used if you have an egg allergy or if your child has an egg allergy. But these make great substitutes for eggs and brownies and then make them a bit of a more nutrient dense treat. Or you could also buy certain products, something like a veggie tot if your child really likes tater tots. You can have a mix of tater tots and veggie tots so that they're getting the same kind of shape of something, and it might taste a little bit different, but you still have the tot texture and shape. Chickpea or cauliflower pizza crust is really great, and it really bumps up the chickpea, especially bumps up the protein of that. And they sell like just blank crust, so you could even make your own pizza with that. There's red lentil pasta, black bean pasta, chickpea pasta. These are all really great options. I find that chickpea pasta has the closest texture and taste to regular pasta. Some of the lentil and bean pastas are not as similar. So chickpea pasta might be the best one to start off with, and then you can kind of branch out from there. And then Made Good bars are something that I really like. They have a lot of vitamins and minerals added to it from whole food sources. So it's coming from like powders and dehydrated versions of fruits, but there's no actual fruits in it. So that wouldn't even be something like a masking. That would just be something that has added nutrients to it. And then working with restrictions. So I know some people have their child might have some sort of restriction on their diet for medical reasons or allergies. So we're going to go into those really quickly and talk about some products. So some alternative dairy-free products. If your child has a lactose intolerance, meaning that they can still have dairy, but they might not be able to digest the lactose very well. These are some products that are still dairy products, but the lactose is completely removed. One of my favorite products specifically is Chobani Complete. It's Greek yogurt, just like their normal Greek yogurt, but just with the lactose taken out. A lot of times I find that a lot of dairy-free yogurts, especially if your child likes the texture of Greek yogurt, is not the same. They tend to be a lot thinner. So this is a great option if your child can have dairy without the lactose. Green Valley Creamery makes dairy lactose-free cream cheese, sour cream, yogurt as well, I believe. Lactaid, which is a very well-known brand, they have ice cream, they have milk, they have sour cream, they pretty much own the lactose-free market, because once lactose intolerance became a thing, this company just kind of formed. And then Land O'Lakes also has lactose-free products. I use their lactose-free half and half very often, which is great. And then if you or your child has a dairy allergy, these are just some companies that I've tried their products and I really like them. There is Mykonos, Violife, Daya products, Kite Hill. They all make dairy-free cheeses, sour cream options, yogurt options, all that kind of stuff. And then another option also is alternative milk. So like I had mentioned before, there's so many different options for alternative milk now. So there's many different options for your child to try. So whatever they like, you can go with that. And then moving into gluten-free items, these are just some places and companies that I like. They're gluten-free products. So for household items, you can get really good gluten-free breads at Trader Joe's. Udi's has some, or Simple Needs. For flours, Bob's Red Mill is really well known for their gluten-free flours. For pastas, Banza is a chickpea pasta, like I had mentioned before. Barilla even has some just plain gluten-free pasta or lentil alternative pastas as well. Jovial Foods is gluten-free, and Rumo has really good quality gluten-free pasta. And then for snacks, Simple Mills is a great brand. Glutino is a great brand. Mary's Gone Crackers, Hippies, which are made from chickpeas, so those have a good source of protein as well. Popcorners and Siete Foods. There really is so many different options, and you guys have the link to the allergy posts I had written. It has an extensive list of products and where you can find these products, what they sell, so that if your child has one of these allergies or intolerances, you can look at them and find some of these products that would work for you and your household. And then lastly, we're going to go into vegan dishes. So veganism and vegetarianism are much more popular nowadays than they used to be. These are all vegetable-based meals. But you can add a vegan source of protein. So something like soy, which comes from like tofu or edamame, is soy. Tempeh, seitan, or beans are also vegan sources of protein. There are now, since again, it's so popular, there's so many vegan alternatives to traditional meat items like mushroom bolognese, where the mushrooms are chopped very finely to kind of have the texture and the mouthfeel of ground beef in a bolognese sauce. There's tempeh bacon. You can really Google search for any vegan recipe that you may be looking for, like vegan mac and cheese, for example. And you'll have so many different options that come up since it is so popular now. So that's also another option if you're really looking for vegan recipes. There's so many different content creators who are vegan or vegetarian that just make recipes, and there's really great options out there. But also just to note, some vegetables that are high in protein: Brussels sprouts, potatoes, asparagus, yellow corn, broccoli. So if your child's eating those, they are also getting protein from those vegetable sources as well.
Awesome.
Now we're just going to go into any questions if anyone has.
Yeah, so if you have questions, please enter them into the chat now. So if you just want to flip to the next slide, I'll just briefly talk while people are typing, if they're typing, about some of our services that we provide in case you don't know about us yet. So we are offering free virtual group classes right now on a monthly basis. So that's a link where you can find all of our upcoming programs. Foodie Friends is a weekly cooking program for teens that's happening in person. We have a couple spots left in that. We also offer private one-on-one classes and private group classes. So our one-on-one classes are all virtual right now, but we could do a group class in person potentially. We offer these free quarterly Guardian webinars. And then I also wanted to point out that we provide weekly emails that include pre-recorded recipes and downloadable resources. And so there's several questions that came up in the Eventbrite too, which we're going to make resources for. So if you're on our mailing list, make sure you're looking out for those. They're every first Thursday, of the month. And then if you're not yet, I'll send you more information about that. You'll be added because you signed up. And so just look out for those. And then we have much more to come in 2022. So if you didn't find what you're looking for, keep in touch with us, which information will be on the next page. Yeah, so you just want to follow us social media, on our newsletter, and all of that. If you're interested in any of these or have more questions, you can email me about them. But if you have any questions related to our presentation today on nutrition, we have a couple more minutes that we can take those now. I don't see any in the chat, but if anybody wanted to unmute themselves, you're also welcome to do that as well. So I'm just going to actually pull some from our Eventbrite, since we have a couple minutes left, and I think they might be worth discussing. So one of the questions was, how do you make healthy food tasty and exciting? Which I think is probably a challenge that all of us have or are currently facing. So, Sophia, what are your thoughts on how to, make healthy food just as good as maybe slightly more unhealthy food? Actually, we have a question in the chat if you want to hold on that for a second. At what age should you switch to low fat dairy is a question in the chat.
There's no age where you necessarily need to make a switch. The overall suggestion is just to try and have a majority of your dairy sources come from either low fat or no fat. But there's not really an age where you need to make a switch necessarily, but also including full fat dairy products in your child's diet is totally fine as well.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for that question and that answer. Did you have thoughts on how we can make our healthy food taste just as good?
Yes. My number one suggestion, if your child is up for it, seasonings and sauces are my favorite way to make anything. You can change the flavor profile of any dish with a seasoning or a sauce. You can even take like something as simple as a piece of grilled chicken with roasted sweet potato and spinach, and you can make it taste different 5 different nights based on how you're seasoning it or what sauce you're putting on it. You can make it have an Italian flair to it. You can give it an Asian spin based on how you are using that. So my number one recommendation would always be seasonings and sauces.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think a good shortcut too, if you don't want to spend a lot of time either researching good blends or anything else, or even putting them together, is to just buy pre-made blends as well. So you can get like certain like poultry seasoning mixes, or you could get Cajun mixes, all different kinds of things that are pre-blended for you, nice and easy to just use right out of the bottle. We are actually going to be creating a resource for that's going to round up some healthy but really tasty recipes. So definitely be on the lookout from us in the next couple of weeks or so. We also will be creating some other resources based on some questions in there. One of the questions that I just want to end with is that somebody asked how we can help a teen or a child understand the value of nutrition in a food item. And I think that the resources that we're providing are meant to be shared with your child or teen and discussed with them, or used on like an ad hoc basis to say, like, how can we get more of something into your diet? So it depends on the age and all of that of your child and teen and their interest in it. You can share this webinar with them if they're really interested and have the capacity to, dive deeper. So, yeah, I think utilizing our resources will hopefully be helpful. If you're utilizing them and running into some stumbling blocks or even just some questions, please reach out to us because we want this to be as resourceful and useful to you as possible. So my email is up there. Sophia's email is up there. Please reach out if you have any questions. We'll be sending this recording and the PDF of this presentation as well, so you can reference this again. But again, as you're going through our materials, please reach out with any questions. This is where we will conclude our webinar with the end of our time, but we will be in touch and we hope to hear from you all soon. Thank you so much for attending. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.